this is where we get into the new generation era of WWE. And I want to pose this question. And I kind of want to see your answer first, and then we'll get into the conversation. But the Montreal Screwjob, was Vince right or wrong in that situation?
Vince was 100% correct, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Couple weeks before, or months, whatever, you had your women's champion go on national television on your competition and take your WWF women's title and toss it in the trash.
And Vince kind of downplayed that and goes, I was bothered by it.
He was bothered by it. Bull crap. That man was livid. The way he is, the way we see from him, that will piss anyone off. It's like I give someone a keys to my car and I say, that's yours as a gift. And they go turn around and they put it in the dumpster, or they take it to the junkyard and they junk it. You know, no,
it's even worse. It's them doing it right in front of you. It's like, it's the disrespect. It was purposely disrespectful.
Especially after right now they're feeling that they're being at war. They just lost all their top-notch wrestlers in Razor Ramon, aka Kevin Hall, Scott Nash, Hulk Hogan, Randy Savage. They were all defecting, heading over to, and there was an avalanche storm on the WWE that wasn't going in a positive way. Then you have your women's title being taken and thrown in the trash, where they want to talk to Bret Hart about, okay, we're giving you an out. You're gonna, I can't afford you, but here's a clause for you to make a lot of money to Turner, who's gonna pay you a lot of money for being the hitman, but I need you to lose the title. Now, Bret, for being egotistic, in my opinion, didn't want to lose the title to Shawn Michaels. I understand Shawn Michaels might have been a butthead, an asshole, a jerk, whatever, at that time, immature. And I get it, you know, I'm like, this guy I gotta drop the title to. But again, he has generation of wrestling family. He has to know what's best for business, protect the business. He also was selfish at that moment because he has other siblings in the business, brother-in-law, family in the business. He should have thought about everyone, not just Bret Hart at the moment. Easier said than done because we're not in Bret Hitman Hart's shoes. Like, if, for instance, if I know they bring in another person who's going to take my job, or how am I going to show him the ropes how to do my job better so they can replace me? I get that too. And from the human point of view, I get that. The ego and being in their shoes. But at the end of the day, it's still his property. Like he said, his company. I am not upset that what Vince McMahon orchestrated to keep his title in his company.
Absolutely. And also, to add to that, it not only left everybody in a better position than if they just did a normal match. Bret Hart was in the best position of his career, where he was able to lobby for $4 million at WCW. Here's another thing that I think is sort of the thing, right? Is that Bret Hart, he lobbied for a huge contract with Vince McMahon and he got it, right? Because Vince was kind of like desperate to hold on to people.
Right.
I don't think anybody expected Austin to blow up the way he did at that time. And Austin and the whole like attitude era, like shift kind of happened at that moment. And it almost devalued Bret Hart in a way, where his type of character sort of became less relevant in wrestling. He wasn't an anti-hero. He wasn't, he was just a quintessential baby face. He wasn't even an all-American baby face. So I think Vince was smart enough to understand, like, Bret's not he's not going to be as valuable as he is now in a year. He's not even as valuable as he is now 6 months ago. You know what I mean? And Bret, I think, overvalued himself and didn't see the change happening. And Vince, I think, saw all the writing on the wall. He understood where it was going. It even took Vince a minute to kind of get there, where Triple H and Shawn Michaels had to push him to the Attitude Era. So I think that's inevitably what led to the screw job, is that with the contract situation. And the fact is that Bret was being selfish in that moment, because it wasn't even really about losing to Shawn. It was about him losing to him in Canada.
Right.
And I feel like you're being a little bit ridiculous. Now, I know Bret had creative control at the time, but it's like, you should know, as much as you love the business, you should know what to do. And this is the right thing to do, is to lose the title, not give it up on Raw the next day. That doesn't help anybody. Brett is very contradictory. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Contradictory. Yeah, sorry. Contradictory in a lot of ways, where he looks at the curtain call, right? Because they covered the curtain call a little bit. And he's like really critical on the curtain call. And he's going, they ruined the business and they exposed everything and this and that.
Yeah.
And then what he does is when the screw job happens, he goes out like literally the next week and goes all over the media and talks about and exposes the business and explains how he was supposed to win and he got screwed over and all that. And it's like, you literally did the thing. Wrestling with Shadows was literally a complete exposure of the business, him narrating it.
Right.
So it's like, I feel like he's very much like, well, I could expose the business. Like I could do it because I'm going to do it the right way.
Like he had the right. That was his God-given right.
Yes. And I get that. Let me say one more thing is the whole documentary opens with Bret Hart giving this really like pompous kind of analysis on himself where he's like, look at me in the ring. Everything I did was great. Every punch I threw, it was real. Everybody believed it. And then the rant ends with him like looking at the camera and going, I was a true artist.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, Brett, stop. You were great. Don't get me wrong.
Don't put yourself over. Let someone else put you over, pal.
Yeah. It's like, all right. Like, so I think Brett really screwed himself. Brett screwed Brett. I was about to say it.
Vince McMahon said it. Brett screwed Brett. Even at that time, I felt the same way with that. You know, because if anything, he should be mad at Medusa, Alundra Blaze, for doing what she did. If they would have not done that, I think Vince would have allowed him to win that title and hold it and beat Shawn. And I think, but the minute Alundra Blaze did it prior to that, he's like, screw that. I'm already been embarrassed enough. I've been embarrassed with the couple years with the steroids allegation. These guys, all my wrestlers are going over there. I'm getting my butt kicked here. My company's uncertain, and I'm gonna let you go ahead and put the nail in my coffin. My world champion with my title, go over there, and dump it. No. And I know. And before people say, well, Ric Flair did that back in the day before Brett showed up on WWE programming and showed the big gold title, but WWE blurred it. They blurred it. And the story behind that big gold title, Ric Flair bought that title himself with his money. So he wasn't going to leave that title that he purchased, his property, with that company where he's no longer working at. It's like with Taz, with the FTW belt. That's his belt. He made it. He's taking it with him whatever company he's in. He could show up tomorrow in GCW, and he'll have that. If he wants to show that FTW belt, he could show it because it's his property. He purchased that. Ric Flair lended to the NWA because Ric Flair wanted something big gold. And before they say that, oh well, they did that with that. WWE was parading. They put a black bar blurring the title. I knew what the title looked like because I watched different wrestling companies. I watched WCW, NWA at that time, and I knew about the big gold. So that's why Vince is like, you know what, I can't have that, and I don't blame him for that. I don't blame him for the ridicule. And when you mentioned about Stone Cold Steve Austin, he just saw, wait a minute, I see money, but I got my money tied up for 20 years. And Brett, I'm going to help him get out of this contract to make more money. Here's some outs, because he said it himself. He showed them where in the contract it showed where there's outs. And Brett was being stubborn. He didn't want to leave. So Vince was like, without really telling him, you got to go. I don't see a future with you anymore in the WWE, without telling him and trying to tell him a nice way. But it escalated to Brett screwing Brett.
I think the second Vince McMahon heard Austin 316 says, I just whipped your ass, he was like, oh my God, I got to free up some money.
Yeah.
I got to pay this guy. He's going to be the best. And I mean, listen, the choice he made, it made a bigger star. I don't want to say bigger star, but it put Bret Hart in a better position that I don't think he was appreciative enough, which I understand because he was angry at the time and all that stuff. But if he was a little smarter, he would have been like, wait a minute, I'm in a really good position. I'm like one of the hottest hands right now outside of the WWE. Everybody wants to hear my first promo when I get back.
Right.
Why didn't he plan a really great promo when he got back? and he didn't. And that's Bret Hart's fault.
I also Bischoff because he couldn't wait to go on Monday Night Nitro with Canadian flags like a dumbass to parade that they got Bret Hart. Like you it was a dumb move.
Yeah, Bischoff admits to this day that he didn't know what to do with Bret. And it's like I don't even see how he didn't know that. Like I get maybe not like his full term. What are you going to do with him? But like you at least know, make him come cut a promo on Vince, let him let it all out. And that's first week at least.
Right.
And then see where that goes. It's like.
And it's a shame because I thought Bret Hart, and we're going to close the Bret Hart chapter.
Yes.
The Bret Hart with the Hart Foundation when he had Pillman, Bulldog, Owen, Neidhart. I kind of like that attitude that they had. They used to call on in the black leather jackets. You know,
I loved it.
I loved it. I was like, you know, they could go up against the Nation of Domination if they want to go at that time before they split. It kind of worked, but then like that happened, and it's like, damn, it's so chaotic. It's like, okay, it is what it is.
Have you ever seen Wrestling with Shadows?
I have not. And I'm a big connoisseur of all that stuff, and I have to watch that one.
Watch that. It's one of those like beyond the mat. You have to watch them. Bret Hart was very reluctant throughout that whole heel run, and I agree. That to me was Bret Hart's best work. Like his promos had passion. They were funny. He was like Bret Hart's actually a funny guy. If you know, like the El Dandy promos. Like those are pretty funny, and he's just being a regular dude. So, yeah, I mean, he never focused on his mic work enough, and I think that's what left him in the dirt as far as like against Austin and Shawn and all these other guys. That's the last I'll say on Bret.
And the thing about Bret with those promos when he was very intriguing because there was patriotism. He was a very patriotic Canadian, and he was shooting on being a Canadian, how much prideful it is to be Canadian and working and shooting on the American public. You know, it's the American, you know, so he was like the Canadian versus the United States. And that's why it resonated, because there's some truth. Wrestling promos are always great when there's a little bit of realism in it, or you can relate to it. And when Bret was talking about his patriotism for Canada and dislike for America, that's why it kind of worked with one of his best work with his promos, because we could relate. We were like, oh, he's taking jabs at us as an American. Screw Bret. I can't. And then Canada loves it. Oh, yeah, give it to the Americans. That's why he was over. But like you said, how much more can you really go? Here's Bret talking his anti-American crap. How long was it going to last if he didn't involve? And maybe that's what Vince saw too. You know, I mean, how much more can I really? How much lemon can I squeeze? Canada versus U.S. People are gonna get. I gotta move on. Where no, with some. So it's interesting on that there with the attitude. You know, so that's what gives form. You could say a little bit of the attitude era, because now you're giving the skyrocket to Shawn Michaels, Hunter, and Triple H there, and you know they were pushing the envelope. They saw what was going on across the other side, and those two guys said to Vince, "Trust us."
Yeah. And to kind of further the conversation as far as like pushing the envelope, that's what Bruce Pritchard was explaining, because they asked him, when was the moment that you knew the Attitude Era started? What's the legit moment? And he is explaining that it was that night that Shawn Michaels went out with the bicycle shorts that were stuffed. And I remember that night for some reason.
With gauze, not socks. It was gauze.
Gauze. Yeah.
Shawn Michaels
grabbed some gauze on the way out. Which is amazing that's what sparked the Attitude Era, was Shawn Michaels on the way out going like, let me just grab this gauze, stuff it in. And Vince was livid about it, and they had to sort of like explain to him, because even I think it was Michaels was explaining to him like, okay, because he wanted to fine him for it. Vince wanted to fine Shawn Michaels, and Shawn like kind of weaseled his way out of the fine by going like, listen, you could fine me or look at this and understand that this is the direction that we need to go. And Vince finally came over to that side, and that's what sparked the Attitude Era, is Shawn Michaels, DX, really pre-DX.
Right, pre-DX, and then they just took off. They became rock stars. I mean, with all they pushing the envelope from all types of matches, and it was just the Attitude Era. That's the era that everyone loves. You know, pack houses. They were larger than life. They were getting, you know, closing the gap on the 83 weeks that WCW had on the WWE number one on TV, where the WWE in the Attitude Era was number one over Monday Night Football, not just WCW, over Monday Night Football.
To put it into perspective for people, it's almost like big time stories or big time things now, like a Marvel movie. You could bring that up almost anywhere, and most people will go, "Oh yeah, I saw that." That's how it was with wrestling back in the 90s. Is literally you can go anywhere, bring up The Rock, bring up Stone Cold, anybody would talk about it. Anybody knew. It's like I don't know if that puts it into perspective for people to understand how cool wrestling was and how important it was in American culture. It was in my world, it was everything. It was literally, I didn't like anything else but wrestling at points. So from that 97 to maybe 2001, my life was just wrestling. Yep. And our Twitter was literally going to school the next day and talking about Raw.
And our podcast was sitting around recess at lunch, where we have a few people talking and going around in circles and talking, sitting at your lunch table with your friends and folks and talk about wrestling. That was your podcast.
Yeah.
That was your YouTube.
Any age demographic you could talk to. It really was like, it's something that it's like a very nostalgic thing for me. And that's what this documentary brought me back to, was like, damn, I remember talking about that when I was young. What I loved is that the choppy segment got put in.
Yeah. I mean, they did so many things that we see now, like, the hanging of Boss Man with the news. And then listen, I know you're going to say, well, for myself, I was very hypocritical. I don't want to sound hypocritical. That's the word. Where we saw Bryant with the bag over the head getting suffocated, but now you're saying, hey, the hanging of Boss Man, just because it was done 25, 30 years ago, doesn't mean it's right. It's, times evolve, times and change. There's more eyes, more children in the product. It's still wrong. It wasn't right back then either. And it's not right now. Just because they did it at those times.
I'll put it this way. I remember Undertaker hanging Austin from the cross.
That was
as a kid, I was like, that is the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life. Right. Mm-hmm. I remember seeing Big Boss Man getting hung from the Hell in the Cell.
Yeah. That's the clip I was talking about.
And when I was a kid, I remember seeing that and going, that was stupid. Why did he do that? Like, I didn't understand that from even like a storyline perspective of like, why the Big Boss Man? Like, I get he was Vince's like henchman and stuff, but it's like that was a little bit much. But I mean, I don't think I got traumatized by any of that stuff. Some of it was definitely stupid. I can admit that. Just because it was Attitude Era doesn't mean it was all gold. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people like to put that on. Now, for instance, I brought up the choppy segment. I don't believe that's necessarily gold, but it's just so memorable because of how ridiculous it was.
Right. And then the best thing, who said it? Oh, I'm gonna choppy your pee-pee. And it was funny.
Choppy. Yeah. It was. And then Kai and Tai and Val Venus in general was such a memorable character. I don't think he gets enough credit in terms of what his controversy, like what he added to the Attitude Era. And he was a mid-carder. Lower mid-carder at that.
Lower mid-carder, never got to the upper mid-card section, but he was very entertaining. He got over a porn star gimmick.
Yeah.
Pretty much. That's what he got. Here's
something, sorry if I'm jumping around, but here's something that I learned from this documentary is that Triple H has been in Vince's ear for a very long time. Way longer than I ever thought. Like,
and I was surprised with that too.
Yes, even when he was like almost a nobody, Vince was still listening to him and liked Triple H to a great deal.